Hi everyone! This is a time-lapse of creating my final project. Before recording, I set up a camera-matched scene in Cinema 4D for the spaceship. This was so that any object placed in the 3D scene would be at the correct angle based on my photograph. There weren't a ton of strong angles in the photo, so mapping coordinates correctly was challenging. I modeled the ground with Cinema 4D's terrain tool. To prepare the render, I set up PBR materials, placed meshes, created a light to simulate the sun, then hit render. I tried to change the color of the terrain in the render, but ultimately decided to adjust that in Photoshop later for added flexibility. These things can always be adjusted later. The render can only get you so far before compositing. Once the render was done, I imported it into Photoshop. I made sure to embed the ship into some terrain so that it would look more convincing as a crashed ship. I opted to manually mask my layers in Photoshop instead of exporting layer masks from Cinema 4D and Octane. That's one approach, but doing it manually gives me extra control over the masking itself. I made the terrain fairly large to give myself plenty of room for irregular, soft brush masking. That way, it blends into the ground in the photo much better. At first, I tried making a levels layer to blend the 3D terrain into the ground. It wasn't working well, and it looked really unnatural. I got rid of that, and I created a paint over layer above it using the color blending mode. I color picked many tones from the ground in the photo and irregularly painted them across the 3D terrain to appear more natural. Once I was satisfied with those results, I applied a small Gaussian blur and noise to the ship and terrain layers. For the next part of my final, I rotoscoped a glowing light from inside of the ship. I painted every frame with a softer edged brush with varying opacities to create a glow. I did more rotoscoping after recording this because the glow was just too subtle. The people I showed it to did not notice the glow easily, so that told me it needed more. I created an additional video layer on top of the one I made in this video. I basically redid the drawings, but with a lighter blue and a bigger, softer brush with varying opacities again. The effort paid off, because the glow is still subtle like I intended it to be, but now it's a lot more visible. My thinking on making the glow subtle is that because it's a crashed ship, not all of the lights inside would be working at their best performance. When I was done with the image, it still didn't feel complete. I decided to add a sign on the fence post that's close to the camera. I found some alien warning sign images on Shutterstock to serve as inspiration, but made my own words and graphics for the design. One important component of their designs was the bright yellow sign with rounded corners and a black outline. Additionally, they all used sans serif bold fonts and made all of their letters uppercase. I made the UFO using shapes layers and adjusting their paths. I tried to break the tangents at the middle point of the top circle to make the correct shape, but it looks like you can't really do that in Photoshop. Using the edge handles got me the result I wanted, so I went with those instead. Once my sign was done, I brought it into my scene and I put it on the fence. To make it blend in with the rest of the image, I made a levels layer to tone down the black a bit. Afterwards, I tried to Gaussian blur the sign, but it blew out all of my lines. The yellow was too solid, and there was no pixels for it to blur. So I made some noise on the sign to give it something to work with, reran the Gaussian blur, and added more noise on top of that to match the photograph. Here's the final result of my animation at a higher resolution. I made a small GIF version for my post on the website, but rendered a high-resolution video for this presentation so that you can see all the details better. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a great summer!